There we go. Good evening. My name is Matt Gordon, and this is our PLG TV live candidate debates. Tonight we will be debating the county judge executive. We have 3 candidates for this debate. We have, it looks like Dean is a Republican there, but he is not. He is
absolutely not.
He does have a red tablecloth, but he is the Democratic candidate for the county judge executive. We have the independent, Jack Hurst, and then we have our Republican candidate, Donald Thrasher. This evening, our debaters here will go through our intros to start. They will have 2 minutes apiece for their opening statements. After that, we will get into the questions that Forrest Berkshire, the editor of the Kentucky Standard, to my left, will be asking, as well as Randy Patrick, to my right, reporter of the Kentucky Standard, will be asking this evening. To my right is Scott Cederholm, who will be giving the time signals, so we will like to keep everybody on track this evening. We would like to thank our sponsors this evening, which is Wilson Muir Bank. We'd also like to thank Lee's Famous Chicken Recipe for our dinner this evening. All right, so no more introductions. We'd like to get started. Now we drew straws in the back, and going first in our opening statements will be independent Jack Hurst.
Hello, my name is Jack Hurst. I'm not a politician, but I am a candidate for a cause. Now Dean's gonna get up here and he's gonna claim every road, and whether it be a state road or whatnot that's happened in his tenure, he's gonna claim that food bank belongs to him. And yeah, he and Al Gore invented the internet. In reality, he runs a bully, vindictive, suppressive government. He's done nothing through his 20 or 25 years except serve the good old boys. Nothing but serve the good old boys. And oh yeah, he named a park after himself. In contrast, we are not accepting political contributions. We will donate the county judge's salary to local charities. And then on day one, we will move, day one of election, we will move to make Nelson County safe again. Namely, by doing that, we're going to take Dean out of the sheriff's office. We're going to take him out of all the respective offices. We're going to give the magistrates their power back. We're also, on day one, we're going to make the resources or whatever needs to be available to solve all these local murders. Then the next thing is even on day one with taxation, we're overtaxed and overregulated. And we're going to move against that. What we want to do is put Nelson County back in business again. We want to go back to building. And on day one, by executive order, we will lower the Nelson County occupational tax rate to 0 for every man, woman, and child who works. We're going to restore ethics and morals back to county government. And I hope you guys got a lot of good questions because we got a lot of ground to cover. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hurst. Second will be Don Thrasher.
First, I'd like to thank PLG 13 and Kentucky Standard for this opportunity. For those of you that I haven't met, I'm Don Thrasher. I moved to Nelson County in 2009 when my dad was living here and was diagnosed with congestive heart failure and not given long to live. My dad passed away, but I've been here ever since and have adopted Nelson County as my home. I was born and raised in Missouri. I went to California for an education opportunity. While I was there, I had an idea for a naturally sweetened sugar-free soda. I founded Thrasher Beverage Corporation on a shoestring budget out of my house. 15 years later, that company is now called Zevia, and it does over $100 million in sales per year. I know how hard it is to build a business from the ground up, and have the leadership experience in the business world that can transition to the public service. I have a strong desire to make sure that we the people come first. I will only take $15,000 of the $100,000 salary if elected. Going door to door campaigning has shown me that people of this county feel they do not have a voice in county government. This is why I want to institute a We the People card. If elected, I would try and institute the program where every registered voter in this county will receive a card with a login and password. Citizens will be able to log in and vote online in a non-binding poll that will be given to the magistrates before they vote. Citizens will also be able to view all the information the magistrate is given so they can be informed on all the issues. I also propose to hold fiscal court meetings around the county at schools in Boston, New Haven, and Bloomfield, so citizens can have easier access to voicing issues. It will also give a chance for students of those schools to be involved in how government works. 240 years ago, a man named Thomas Jefferson was the principal author of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson also gave a warning to Americans that still stands true today. He famously said, "By throwing the rascals out from time to time, the people will remind government that it exists to serve us and not the other way around." I believe the people of Nelson County deserve to have a county government that is accountable, transparent, responsive, and fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thrasher. Mr. Watts.
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay? I'm going to test this about every time I speak. After this election, we will have at least 5 newly elected county officials. We'll have a new jailer, county clerk, sheriff, and at least 2 new magistrates. I believe my 25 years of experience can prove very valuable to these office holders, since the county judge interacts with each of them on a daily basis. While they are independent office holders, I always feel we are all part of the same team. Economic development is at an all-time high in Nelson County. Roads and bridges continue to see many improvements, and we are working hard every day to help the displaced American Ingredients workers. We do have an open door policy where all citizens can come visit us at any time without an appointment. And we do have a good team, and I ask you to continue to support our efforts in making Nelson County the best place to live. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Now we'll be moving into questions, and Forrest Berkshire has the first question.
Thank you, and thank you all for participating this evening. This question is going to go first to the judge there, and then it'll go to Don, and then to Mr. Hurst. If at any time, if you're following another candidate's question and you need to repeat it, just ask us, because it can take a while. But Judge, first to you. Why should voters choose to re-elect you to county judge? Why should they choose you as a county judge? What is it about your background, experience, or character that should convince voters to cast their ballot for you?
I've had the experience of 21 years working for a private company. Started when I was 14 years old, working for the Shapiro family. I learned a lot by interacting with people on a daily basis at the retail level, and then later on into the management stages. I think that is as an asset to me today, dealing with the people and working with the people on a daily basis. And since then, obviously, I've been serving the county judge for 25 years. This county, it continues to move forward. Our growth is envious by most of our counties around us. And we have an honest and fair government, despite what some folks think. My door is always open. I interact with people. I can go to the Walmart on a daily basis, and my wife will attest to that. Not daily, but several times a week, and people, I'm a half hour, 45 minutes just to get a loaf of bread. So I do interact with a lot of people. The government, I do watch the taxes and the expenditures. It's proved very beneficial to the county. When I got elected office, we had $619 million in assessed value. We're at $2.7 billion today. Jobs are plentiful right now in Nelson County, and economic development is at a boom.
Thank you, and now it'll go to Mr. Thrasher.
Well, one of the key differences between myself and my opponent is I started a company from the ground up, and I know how it is, how hard it is to actually put your blood, sweat, and tears into something and produce something. I think when you deal with that on a government level, you appreciate people's dollars more, because you're not spending someone else's money when you start. When you start a business on a shoestring budget, you're spending your money. To translate that into county government, I agree. We need to put the taxpayer first. We need to make sure everything is equalized for our senior citizens, for the young people. I agree. We have to have economic development, and as a business leader in the private sector, I believe that my experience will transition very well into the public sector because of the experience that I've had. And I think the most important thing is what I've gone through in terms of not seeing the public participation in this county. Up on this stage back in May, Judge Watts said when he was against Kenny Fogel that he gets the cold chills from the thought of a blue ribbon commission for public input. That gives me the cold chills. That should give everybody in this room the cold chills, because public participation is what democratic values are about. If you want a leader that doesn't like public participation or any type of public committees, then you should vote for my opponent. But if you want a county government that you can participate in and you can have a voice in, then I'd ask you to consider voting for me.
Thank you, Mr. Thrasher. Now to you, Jack.
Well, we've been here, 10 or 15 minutes, and Dean's already exonerated everything I said in my opening statement. But I'd like to expand upon that, because he's claimed all things I said he would. I'd like to expand upon that, though, where we get into, we're losing our stability. There's too many murders, and the drugs are at an all-time high. It goes back to even what I was talking about in the housing. We're at an all-time low. We don't have enough housing here to satisfy a lateral movement for 45,000 people in this county. Rent is sky high in Barstown if you can find a place. So we have to get that whole industry moving. And that doesn't mean we give it away to some foreign company. We got to keep it here at home. We got to get building going back again, okay? And then the other thing is that when Dean was probably in Walmart, it was probably during business hours, and he was probably buying Miller Lite. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Randy?
All right, I'm going to ask this question first of Mr. Thrasher, and then Mr. Hurst, and then lastly Judge Watts. What are the two most important issues facing Nelson County's government in the next 4 years, and how should local officials deal with it?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues is the opioid problem, which translates into the jail issue. Dorcas Fig obviously says about 85%, approximately 85% of the inmates that come through Nelson County Jail are drug related. And I think when you're dealing with something like that, this is just a huge issue, and I think we have to be very careful, because Secretary of the Justice Cabinet Secretary Tilley, back in December, I believe it was, maybe January of this year, wanted to introduce legislation that would limit certain crimes from felonies to misdemeanors and start reducing levels. And I think if we start just trying to build a new jail, like for $5 or $6 million, I think we may get ourselves in trouble if this legislation passes. I also think we ought to start taking a look more at home incarceration. I met last week with Matthew White, our county attorney, and I asked him, recently in Madison County, they passed the fiscal court there passed a comprehensive home incarceration program where the county actually buys the equipment for the home incarceration. And I think we ought to be taking more look at that, because to just throw somebody in jail and that's waiting to go to, that's still not proven guilty, I mean, that's a horrendous jail from all reports. I mean, it's not somewhere I'd want to be, and I don't think anyone in here would want to be there. But I think in order to limit the capacity, we need to look at what they did in Madison County with the home incarceration program, and I think that's something that we should definitely do. But I think that's probably the paramount problem in the next 4 years is overcapacity at the jail, because I mean, I think it's averaging about 160 inmates, and that's way over capacity, and we're gonna have to do something.
It was actually, the question was the top two opioids and the jail, or?
Well, I think they can be conflated into the same one, but if you really want another one, I think one of the things I look at as being a problem, and from what I hear I've been knocking doors throughout the county, and if I haven't knocked on your door yet, I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance to. I've been trying, but what I get is planning and zoning, and I think we need to take a look out. The people out in the county just feel underrepresented. And I think we need to take a look at adding additional 2 or 3 planning and zoning commission members to the unincorporated areas, because the rural people don't have a voice. There are 30,000 people that live in the unincorporated areas of this county, and we only have currently, we're supposed to have 5 seats on the planning and zoning commission, but because Mr. Bush lives in the city of Bardstown, we only have 4. So I think we need to take a look at that too.
All right, Mr. Hurst, you're next.
Well, we've already talked about 2, but I'm gonna jump from those now, and the 2 that I'm gonna bring to you right now is we're overtaxed and we're overregulated. From a taxation part, I don't know about you people, but my taxes go up every year, and regardless of what he says, they go up every year. The overregulated part, we are overregulated, and what compounds that even more is the fact that of the selective enforcement. Code enforcement is directly under the county judge, and he wears a crown. He's a king. He wears a crown, and he abuses that power, and we need to get him out of that office. That needs to be corrected. But those are the 2 things I'm gonna pick for you right now is taxation and regulation.
Randy, that question was actually asked in at least one other form that Don and I both agreed on in that particular subject, and that was the opioid crisis and the parallel to that with the jail. You know, Madison County has made some drastic changes in what they're doing, but they passed a massive tax increase. They were looking for P3 partnerships and could not find a private company to partner with them on their jail and their treatment center, kind of all in one, like a one-stop shop place, and could not find that private partnership to make that work. But most certainly the opioid problem is a national issue, it's a Kentucky issue, it's a Nelson County issue. And the national studies have said you cannot police yourself out of that problem. You could add more and more police on the street will not affect that problem. The national studies have proven that. So you look at treatment, you look at support groups. We've been able to help a small group, startup group here in Nelson County called United for Recovery to help the families. You know, the families are affected, if not more affected sometimes than the folks that are on the opioids and the other addictions. So that's important to somewhere along the line, we need to sit down and talk about how can we make that better for the families. And this United for Recovery group, we hope one day to be able to assist them even further. The other thing that came up during our previous discussions, I believe Jack mentioned planning and zoning. Don did planning and zoning. Planning and zoning got started in 1974. There's been multiple changes over the last decades. And planning and zoning has changed with times. It changed with the times as Nelson County has grown, as the communities have grown, as the citizens have asked for more. I see stop sign. But planning and zoning, I fully support planning and zoning. I will continue to support planning and zoning.
Don, I believe you asked for 1 minute to rebuttal.
Yes, I did. So the judge is correct about Madison County having a massive tax increase, but this home incarceration program was subsequent to that. This was passed in January of this year to curtail the growing expenses. So this was actually a cost-saving mechanism because the people that are in home incarceration, they remunerate back to the county. So this is actually to a cost-saving mechanism. So I hope you don't get the impression that home incarceration would add a tax burden to Nelson County.
I didn't mean it that way. No.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
I would like just a little rebuttal.
Oh, Jack wanted to, he raised his hand first.
He can respond to both of us. Dean made reference to the fact of the planning and zoning and how he supports and everything. Then my question to him is why won't he obey the comprehensive plan? He goes against it for the good old boys, for what's convenient for them, and won't abide by it. When can we come back and comprehensive plan mean something?
I'd like a rebuttal just to Don's response here. On the home incarceration program, the circuit judges and the district judges are the one that have to order those currently under the current regulations and laws. So that would be strictly up to those judges. And Our current judges have always seemed to be very limited in that because of the precaution and it depends on what the crime is and how many times these folks have been back through the system. All that comes into play.
All right, we'll move on to the next question. Forrest.
This question is going to go to Mr. Hurst first, then to Judge Watts, and then to Mr. Thrasher. Mr. Hurst, to you first. Candidates of both the primary and the general election have said the current county judge executive has been in office too long. Is that an issue, and why or why not?
It's the issue. You'd have to live in a bubble to not realize that. He is the exemplary thing of term limits because he's got to the point where the good old boys, he's indebted to them too much. He's not an elected official anymore. He's a king. He wears a crown. Yes, it's been too long.
And Mr. Thrasher.
Well, I do believe that you have to look at the first 175 years of this country. During that first 175 years of this country, there was no term limits for the President of the United States. During that 175 years, there was only one president that served more than 2 terms. That was FDR, Franklin Roosevelt. The thing of it is, 175 years of up until FDR, all those presidents, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, the third president, was especially precedent-setting. He basically set the precedent for everybody else and said, you know what, 2 years is enough. No one seeked office after 2 consecutive terms for 175 years because our founders knew what happens when you have someone like King George back in England dictating to people. And you know, I agree with Mr. Hurst here because it should be a key problem. Only because you have to go back and look at our history. Look at why, for those 175 years, we only had one president that served more than 2 terms. And that's even arguable because it was FDR during the war, so they basically didn't want a discontinuation of the continuity of the president during wartime, and I understand that. But after that is when Congress said, enough is enough, let's start having term limits. And you know what? I used to be on the fence about term limits, but after entering into this race, I'm off the fence. I have seen where county government is, when they first wrote the Constitution and didn't include term limits, they didn't envision a huge road department. They didn't envision a huge landfill and solid waste department that has, a lot of employees. All those employees, are being told that I want to privatize the garbage trucks and fire all the garbage people and privatize them. That was his opponent's idea back in May, not mine. But I'm still being condemned about that. But the point is, when you're a leader in government and you have this big behemoth behind you, you can tell these county employees, hey, this guy he wants to fire you and make a bunch of changes. Well, that's just not the case. But that's why these people stay in office for so long, and that wasn't what this country was about. And that's why 175 years we didn't have anybody over 2 terms. So that's my opinion.
And Judge, I think I know the answer to the first part of the question.
So this is one of the few times that I would agree with our Senator Mitch McConnell. We have term limits, and every one of us sitting here today dictates that term limit. And when you take that right away from you, you're taking the rights away from our country. Thank you.
And I think we had a rebuttal there. I think first to Mr. Hurst.
What I want to say is that Ms. McConnell's been there too long too. But
I don't
but Dean's been there so long. That's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. And when you transfer that back on to the main problem that we're having in this county, we're to the point now where we're so overtaxed and so overregulated, we're losing our stability. And by that, the Sherry Ballard thing, all that stuff in the news, it's so prevalent of all of it. And the main reason when Dean gets to the point that he is now, he is so overbearing in all these offices. And you gotta get him, you gotta get Dean out of the sheriff's office, because you can't have any politics in law enforcement.
Well, I think that goes to the point of Dean using Mitch McConnell. When you look at the different issues for term limits, like I said, they didn't have, these big behemoths, and they didn't have like all these boards. When Thomas Jefferson, when he was building his house, he didn't have to go to planning and zoning to get a permit. And when George Washington chopped down a cherry tree, he didn't have to get permission from the city or county first. It's like now you have all these behemoths that are beholden to somebody that's made appointments, that's given them jobs, and those people have families. And when those people have friends and families, and they're, that's why incumbents, 85% of incumbents in the United States are reelected for a reason. Not because they're necessarily good, but they give things to people. They do favors for people. They put people on boards. They give people jobs. I get that. But it's not right. That doesn't mean it's right.
All right, we'll move on to the next question.
All right, this is a long one, so bear with me. I'm gonna have to read it, and it probably should go to the challengers first. So let's start with Jack, if you'll answer this, and then Don, and then Dean. It seems that every 4 years we start hearing accusations of corruption in the government, but never any specific charges that can be proved. For the challengers, is there corruption in county government? And if so, please tell us what it is. For the incumbent, why do you think we repeatedly hear this? Can we improve the public trust in local government?
I'm first.
Yes, sir.
You don't have enough time. You don't have enough time. It basically started, Dean was elected in 94. By 95, and if you go back to the planning and zoning meetings of 95 in April and May, you can see where all the planning and zoning, in other words, the family real estate business was put at such an advantage that they made literally hundreds of thousands of dollars by 3 words. By 3 words. Pay attention to me now. 3 words. Curbs and gutters. Okay? What that said basically was they exempted themselves to give them a monetary advantage. That when you go to all the subdivision behind American Tire and behind Busick's, what that did was it put them in a market advantage that nobody else could have. It cursed the city of Barstown with drainage issues for the next 100 years, because when you do curbs and gutters, you have to do this thing called storm drainage. They didn't do it. They didn't do it. Then you can echo forward in time, and we can come to Woodlawn Springs. Same thing's going on there. We were in court with some of the Watts administration, and they were on oath in the court trying to convince people of a Woodlawn Springs situation that water runs uphill. It doesn't, okay? But that whole thing at Woodlawn Springs is just a mess. And it's a paradox of a mess. And you didn't need to have government in on it, and that's a sweetheart deal. You've also got the 2 truck episode that went back in the early 00s. The 2 trucks, or not the 2 trucks, the 2 visits of the truck. That was where the code enforcement agent from Nelson County was going to Bullitt County to help them out. Right there was fraud committed. It had to do with plan reviews, didn't have anything to do with the truck. The county judge ran interference for that for a year or 2 by diversionarily running the misdirection that had to do with whether the truck went down there. Didn't have anything to do with it. Didn't have anything to do with it. So you had fraud committed by your code enforcement agent. They're on the job today. I'm gonna tell you, there's monies, there's tens of thousands of dollars that moved there. The other thing is, of course, in the legalization of nepotism. That was the most comical day in the history of Nelson County Fiscal Court, where the court in the wee hours of the night changed the nepotism rule. They changed it and then snuck it through. The comical part was, and this belongs on World Dumbest Politicians, they copied and pasted the wrong ordinance. They copied and pasted the cities. When we confronted them about it, that's when I can't tell you all the stuff that happened. But you don't have enough time in all the days. The insurance thing that just come into play right now, where they took the insurance away from a Barstown company and gave it to a Louisville company. If that's not borderline collusion, it's collusion. you've got, but you've got to have all the facts and some cooperation to get those facts to prove it. I have to stop, but there's more.
Okay, now, Mr. Thrasher, if you'll answer the same question. If either of you need me to repeat it, I can.
Well, only because you asked. I didn't plan on bringing it up, but since you asked. I know you asked for specifics, and I have given specific facts. There's a certain online blogger that says that I have loose facts, but here are the facts, and this is all public record that can be verified. Woodlawn Springs had a mortgage for $4.5 million with Wilson and Muir Bank. Well, the Osbornes weren't doing very well with the golf course, so it went under. They had a $200,000 tax lien placed on it in March of 2017 for $200,000. Not for unpaid income tax, but for unpaid withholding tax. So in other words, they didn't pay the employee withholding that they withheld from their employees' checks. That is the number one priority for the IRS enforcement office. So when they do that, that property became seizure to immediate IRS seizure and auction. So if that would have been happened, Wilson and Muir could have faced a huge loss. They had a $4.5 million mortgage. And if that would have been auctioned for 20 cents on the dollar, that would have been a huge loss. So what happens? Mark Mathis is on the board of directors of Wilson and Muir. Instead of recusing himself, he was the deciding quorum forming member on the planning and zoning that pushed that through. Okay, a resident of Woodlawn Springs filed an ethics complaint. They did terminate that investigation. The very next day after they terminated the investigation, Mr. Mathis donates $1,000 to Dean Watt's campaign fund. Now, more on Mark Mathis. A month before his new, Mr. Mathis's new son-in-law married Mr. Mathis's daughter, a month before that, he became the new Nelson County Tourism Department's social media director. Makes about $60,000 a year. You know, this was also in that time frame of the $1,000 donation to Mr. Watts. I'm not judging it. That's for you guys to judge. But those are the facts.
Let me go. Am I here? Here. Let me go directly to Don's accusations about Mark Mathis. Mark Mathis has made contributions to my campaign since 1993. My first year as running for judge. So does people like the folks at Heaven Hill and other places, public record. Those folks want good business people. They want business people that can sit down with them on a regular basis and talk about things sensibly, logically, to move their companies and communities forward. Mark Mathis is a city appointment. He is not a county appointment to the Planning Commission. He is a city appointment. I have no control over the appointments. Go back to the son-in-law that Don is mentioning. I have absolutely nothing to do with the hiring process at all. That actually goes through the Tourism Commission. The Tourism Commission, in that particular case, actually hired a group out of Louisville called the Oliver Group. The Oliver Group went through a vetting process, and they went through a bunch of applications and narrowed it down to 5 people. One of those folks happened to be Mark Mathis' son-in-law or future son-in-law. I guess they're married or not. I had absolutely nothing to do with that. Amen. That's it. Now, let's go back to the insurance that Jack mentioned earlier. Our insurance for years was with the Union Wilson and Company, and Travelers was the underwriter. Pat Conway is a local fellow, lives here in Nelson County. His company is called USI. His office is in Louisville, but Pat bids on our insurance. It was a bidding process where we took quotes. We usually take a quote for a 3 to 5 year period. That way you get your rates guaranteed if your losses do not go over certain percentages, and that's worked very well for the county, been very beneficial to the county. Was there anything else I was accused of doing that I forgot here? Go back to the code enforcement truck being in the other county, in Boley County. That code enforcement truck was in the other county because I sent it over there. The truck, we have an interlocal agreement or an agreement with Boley County and Washington County where if our electrical inspector is on vacation, then they come over and do inspections for us, and likewise. That's good government. It's government working together and not being bureaucratic. Thank you.
All right, Don, you had a rebuttal?
Yes, going back to Patrick Conway, I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot. Patrick Conway, he got $200,000 contract, and I still have not been able to find out where that was advertised to bid out. But interestingly enough, a lot of times, a lot of people advertise, or they go into the Nelson County Sheriff's Office and they're told, well, we're not hiring, we're only hiring laterals. In other words, officers from other jurisdictions. They're told the Nelson County doesn't have the funds to send somebody through the academy. But I guess when Patrick Conway's son a couple of years ago wanted to be on the Sheriff's Department, they found some money for that, and Patrick Conway's son is now a deputy sheriff. So I know you say that there was actually 83 applications for that social media director for Nelson County Tourism, and you know what? 2 of them were from New Haven, and 2 of them were very capable people. And I'd like to know what you think the people of New Haven think about something like people like Mr. Mathis's son-in-law are getting special treatment on the backs of people like the people in New Haven that also applied that were very capable.
All right. Now, both of you all had a rebuttal, but Mr. Hurst, you want to go first?
Let me say the insurance facts speak for themselves. The fact that the code enforcement, the truck being down there, as Dean's still taking up for the code enforcement guy, which those guys left a trail that's a mile wide. There's checks and all to prove it. The whole thing's there. It was fraud or forgery or however you want to come about the charges. Okay, and then the fact that the judge didn't address the land advantage for his family. All I have to say is that it's touche.
Just a rebuttal on the Pat Conway hiring at the Nelson County Sheriff's Department, one of the best hires the Sheriff's Department's ever made. Pat Conway has a 4-year degree from in actually criminal justice training, and at that time, during several times that we've hired deputies, finding an experienced deputy that you want to put on your force. See, we just don't take anybody on the force. We're looking for folks that are going to make a difference in the community, going to be polite to our citizens of the county, have the wit, and somebody's going to be with us a while. So during that time, everybody was gobbling up other folks, patrol folks, people, detectives. The bigger departments were gobbling up. The state police was actually gobbling up a lot of the candidates that we would normally choose from. And we've actually, we've got 2 slots open now, preparing for next year, because we've got a couple of retirees coming up. So you have to plan these things. It takes almost a full year to get a policeman on the street, and you have to plan those things. But Pat's been a great hire for us.
All right, Mr. Thrasher.
Are you personal friends with Mr. Conway?
I am not.
You're not. Okay, so you just think that it's just coincidence that the person that gets the county's insurance contracts, and also your biggest campaign contributor, Mr. Mathis's son, just happens to be the best candidate, and then Mr. Conway's son just happens to be the best candidate too. There's just a lot of coincidences, and you know what? These aren't the only 2 examples. These are just 2.
No evidence.
All right, Mr. Hurst.
Again, I say the facts speak for themselves in the insurance deal. But let me add, there's a lot of other things that are bid or not bid, should I say, in these conspicuous manners that really need to be looked into. Let me leave it at that.
All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Forrest?
This question is going to go to Judge Watts first, then it'll go to Mr. Hurst, and then to Mr. Thrasher. And I know we've already touched on this a little bit, but should Nelson County Fiscal Court build a new county jail or a drug rehabilitation facility for inmates? If not, how should the county address the problem of overcrowding? And Judge Watts, first to you.
The current jail is, I think, part of it was built in '89 and added on in '92, shortly after the original construction, so there's no doubt that we need an update. Now, Don was talking about earlier, and he and I both agree on this subject, that there is currently legislation nationwide, and the state's actually looking at some of the legislation, that will take, that could possibly take us, say, if we've got 120 to 140 inmates today, it could take it down easily to 60 to 80 inmates on a daily basis. That would be 2 things. One, lowering the felonies from, actually raising the felonies from $500 now to $2,500. A lot of these folks in the jail are in jail because they've committed a crime as far as trying to get money for drugs. So that could drastically, like, I would hate to invest $5 to 10 to $15 million in a jail that you don't have the inmates for, especially if the law is changed to allow those folks to bail out. It's called a 3-day rule, where they can actually bail out within 3 days. That's being really studied. The Pew report is studying it on a national basis, and so we're going to monitor that real close. But we will need to update, or if we don't build a new jail, we'll need to update our current facility to bring it up to better standards.
Thank you. Mr. Hurst?
Well, a new jail is inevitable just because we have a growing population. But having said that, it needs to come down to, you got to prioritize it as to when you do it and how you do it and how big it is and, you know, what does it cost. So those factors lay into it. The other thing about a jail is, I guess what I'm saying, I know what I'm saying is, you're going to have to do it at some point. I don't know that now's the point because we don't have a clear handle on it. But the other thing is that has to be addressed is the opioid situation. We've got to come about that, and this is something that needs to be legislated, and we don't need to make a criminal out of everybody just because they take pills. Some people don't want to take them, but they're trapped. Now, the guy that's pushing it, he belongs in the jail. But I guess what I'm saying is that we need to do what we can to legislate it where we don't have as many people going into jails. But a new jail at some point is inevitable, yes.
And Mr. Thrasher.
Well, I think both of my opponents, I agree with both, a couple of their points. The first one being that, yes, building a jail right now actually would not be prudent because we just don't know what like Secretary Tilley's legislation is going to go through or not. That's why I wanted to try and increase the home incarceration, because I think a lot of these people, like I said, they're not proven guilty yet, and I think that's one of the things that if you build on that home incarceration levels, try and build that up. And yes, you do have to work with the court system, and you know, they have to make a decision too. I mean, if they prefer to keep people that are still innocent until proven guilty incarcerated in the Nelson County Jail, well, that's up to them. But I think that from a fiscal standpoint, we need to take a look at more home incarceration. My understanding of back in '93, Mike Abel had plans to expand the jail by that property next door. Is that accurate?
It was discussed, yes.
Is there any reason why it was never moved on? Because it does seem more logical to have added on to that if they had to, instead of just...
We've actually about 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago, have a set of plans where we were going to add on to the current facility and redo the current facility inside to make the kitchen much more friendly and the rest of the facility much better and upgraded. But that didn't happen. Fiscal court decided at that time not to move forward.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next question.
Do you support, let's go Judge Watts first. Do you support the district court's efforts to save the Stephen Foster story in the J. Dan Talbot Amphitheater? And should the county do something similar for the Civil War Museum?
That second question is a little tougher than that first question, right, Randy? Yes, I fully support it. Actually, sat in a room with Senator Higdon, Chad McCoy, officials from the Tourism Cabinet, the Finance Cabinet in Frankfurt, and offered the suggestion that we came up with was a lease to the county. We've been able to raise about $898,000 so far. Just received, included in that, a $250,000 grant from the Finance Cabinet and the Tourism Cabinet out of Frankfurt for that project. We are on track to make it work. That subject, as far as the Civil War Museum, there's a lot of discussion going on right now, Randy, about that. We're going to look at that effort as well. Yes, it is worth saving.
Okay, Mr. Hurst, if you'll answer the same question.
When you come up into the drama, the thing that comes to mind first is it's election time. You know, you always do these things at election time. Should the Nelson County taxpayer foot the burden for it? No. Does anybody really dislike the drama? No. Everybody likes the drama, but it's a question of who pays for it. The other thing is you say no county monies are going into it, but then you've got in-kind contributions, what you call, where the county workers are going in and doing this or that. Who pays for that? So it really comes back to who pays for it. Nobody's against it. Nobody's against the drama. And really, if you go back to what I was saying on the taxation and the burden of all the rules, if you come back and straighten that problem out and get rid of the occupational tax and things, it'd be easier for the drama to be in business. It'd be easier for you guys to be in business. The way we are now, the business is all against you. That's why we have very few entrepreneurs here. But it comes back to the drama. What I'm saying is relax the rules and the taxation of it, and probably the drama could thrive.
Mr. Thrasher.
I'm glad you asked this. This is a good question because this is one of the questions I've had. Is actually went back and pulled the lease, the original lease from 1968 between the Stephen Foster drama and the State Parks Commissioner. And interestingly enough, it says that the legal obligation to make those repairs that should have been made was on the back of the state, not the county, not the drama. So my question is, when you and Dick Heaton and Senator Higdon and Chad McCoy met with the Parks Commissioner, why didn't you guys ask him to live up to their legal obligation that was included in that lease? There was only one amendment to that lease. It was in 1989 that was just to improve the insurance coverage. But why would you guys bail out the state instead of the state bailing out what they should have done to begin with? Because I think it's a bit problematic when you... By the way, I think as a last resort, yes. I think getting contributions, if they're really there, is good. But on the other hand of that, we've had a senior center over by the courthouse that has been, 2/3 of it has been unused, and there was purportedly plans to put in, human services like United Way, the Red Cross, and things like that. And Dean's response was, well, it's been vacant all that time because there was no money to do anything with it. So, I agree. The Stephen Foster drama is history, and I'm for it. But my other question is, why push so hard? Why not push hard for equally for the human resources center that you had planned 8 or 9 years ago? Because I think that's just as important as the Stephen Foster drama. But if you would have asked, personally, I think you should have met with Governor Bevin and said, Governor Bevin, that if it says right here in the lease that the state is interested in having this for their tourism levels, for our tourism levels, it's the best. It would have been the best thing to actually address Governor Bevin with, and you guys could have met with him and asked him why he is not ponying up what they had the legal obligation from that 1968 lease to do.
Rebuttal?
Sure.
The first thing out of our mouth said in that meeting was, why isn't the state taking care of what they're supposed to be taking care of? Don is right, we asked that question. The response was, we have no money. The state does not have the money. We've got X number of parks that need 20 to 40, 50, $60 million worth of repairs, whatever the number they pulled. And so we're at a stalemate. The state had no money. They were not going to put any money into the parks anymore. And so in order to keep the 60th anniversary going and continue to move forward, that is, by the way, in Nelson County. And no matter who holds the lease on the property, it is our park, no matter what anybody says. And we are working toward the goal of the state transferring they're deeding that property over to the county in the near future. It might be 6 months to a year from now, but they're willing to participate and do that, and then it will become our property, and the community will benefit greatly by it.
All right, Don, you had a rebuttal?
Yes. Okay, so I talked to Donnie Holland actually last week. He's the Parks Commissioner, Kentucky State Parks Commissioner. And I asked him, one of the questions I asked him, I'm like, so why put this off on the county? He's like, well, the county could do it cheaper. He's like, it would cost us $3 million, whereas it's going to cost $1 million for the county to do it. He's like, well, it would have cost the state $500,000 just to tear it down. So I asked Donnie, I'm like, well, why didn't you just give us the $500,000 you were going to use to tear it down instead? And why didn't they negotiate that into the contract? And he said, well, your guys never brought that up. So I think there's a lot of stuff that people aren't looking at. And he didn't address the issue of the human services over by the senior center. I'd like you to do that.
Mr. Hurst?
Is through all this, and I'm going to side with Mr. Thrasher here, Dean seemed to have a lot of trouble with the truth. So actually what happened in those meetings, we'd have to hear a recording of it. But my response to all this is wide election time. We like the drama, but wide election time.
Rebuttal on that is that this process started last November, December in 2000, and we're in 1817. So that wasn't election year, Zach. And the other thing is that Donnie Holland and the state of Kentucky Commissioner for Parks, I did everything but beg them for money. Everything but begging them for money. Before I left the door, I said, just give us $30,000. Just give us something to get us going. And we got zero. Senator Higgins' help, very influential, along with the finance cabinet secretary, was very helpful. And they produced and gave us $250,000. It took us a while to get it, but we were able to get it. Because the state issued $10 million worth of bonds this year, and they're doing another $10 million worth of bonds next year. And then they're going to try to start working on the parks on a slow, gradual basis.
All right, unfortunately, we're out of time. We're out of time for our questions. So we're going to move into our closing statements. Our order for our closing statements will be Dean first, then Mr. Thrasher, and then Mr. Hurst will finish. So, Dean, you have the floor.
We're just now having fun. As we plan for the future, allow me to share projects that we will continue to work on to enhance our community. We want to continue to expand the Springfield Road past the Bluegrass Parkway project to the county line. We want to take Kentucky 245 and 5-lane it all the way to I-65. We want to continue to work on the outer western bypass. We want to finish our amphitheater project that we just talked about. We want to expand our help to the United for Recovery group by working on more grants. We want to fix the intersection in front of St. Joe Church, which is US 62 and 31. We're working on that project as we speak. The stability of county government is at stake 2 weeks from now. Honest, positive, and progressive leadership is what I have to offer on November the 6th. With 25 years of experience, I am the best candidate to keep this county moving forward. I will continue to work hard to keep your taxes low, and I pledge to treat everyone fairly and with respect, no matter the size of their pocketbooks or status in life. And finally, I will continue to work to make a positive difference in our community, even if it's one life at a time. I ask for your vote on November the 6th, and may God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Thrasher?
I got involved in Nelson County politics because the people of my road were not given a voice. My opponents said there would be too many opinions. After fighting for our rights, my neighbors and I finally had a voice, and that is why our road is now called Colonel Cox Road, in honor of Colonel Isaac Cox, a participant in the American Revolution and one of the original settlers of Cox's Creek. Colonel Cox fought for freedom and rights from a dictator in England named King George. Our road name now stands as a symbol that we will not forget the reason Colonel Cox and good men fought and died for our rights. History should be honored, but more importantly, I think the people that died fighting for the idea of democratic values 240 years ago would expect that the people would stand up when those rights are forgotten by a privileged few that have become career politicians. Career politicians are not what is right about this country. They are what is wrong about this country. My opponent recently demonstrated this when a single mother who was trying to restore a historic home went to Dean and asked for a tax moratorium during the renovation period, which many others get. Dean told her no, because, quote, she didn't approach him with the right attitude. The county judge executive should be accountable and accessible to the people. My cell phone is 502-510-4953. If elected, I will not change that number. When county government is not listening to your voice, call this number and I promise you will be heard. I promise you there will be no backroom deals if I am elected. No residents of any subdivision will be sold down the river on my watch. When you go in that voting booth, I humbly ask that you not view Don Thrasher as a Republican or a Democrat, but view Don Thrasher as a neighbor trying to do the right thing. I am not perfect, and I will make mistakes, but I promise this, I will try my best to do what is right and equitable for all. I am a Christian conservative who believes that the duty of any citizen is to stand up when they see government gone wrong. Stand up for the little guy. Stand up for the farmer. When we the people stand up together, that is when we the people of Nelson County will have liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Thrasher. Mr. Hurst.
I stated when we started this that I was a candidate, but only for a cause. And by saying that, you know, the cause is obvious, and we need to overthrow the kingdom. I've been appalled at the amount of people that have come forward, all of them having their dean stories, this, that, and the other. But what I'm going to do is say to all the people, don't be afraid or to stand up to the suppression that we've had in the past, to join our cause, because regardless of what happens on November 6th, November the 7th will still be there. I ask all of you to please vote.
All right. Well, first, we'd like to thank you three gentlemen for participating in our debates this evening. We'd like to wish you all luck.
Thank you.
We would like to thank John White, who is our producer, the man behind the curtain this evening. We want to thank Forrest Berkshire, Randy Patrick, for asking our questions. We want to thank Scott Cederholm, to my right, for keeping time. And a special thank you to Patrick Beam, who's on the camera behind me. And we want to thank the rest of our team, who wasn't able to be here this evening. We want to thank everyone here tonight for attending, and we'd like to thank you at home for watching. And we want to invite you back here tomorrow night for our debates, which will start at 6 p.m. again. And tomorrow night will be the state representatives, which is James Deweese versus Chad McCoy. We also want to thank our sponsors, Wilson and Muir Bank, and we'd also like to thank Lee's Famous Recipe Chicken for feeding us this evening. I'm Matt Gordon. This is our PLG Live Debates. Thank you.